My friend slammed her hand on the counter and hissed, "Don't lie. You inherited your house." Her words cracked through the store like glass shattering. For a second, all I could hear was the hum of the refrigerator units behind me and the soft clatter of the employee's pen hitting the floor. My jaw tightened before I even realized it. A small sting shot up my neck, that kind of sting you feel when someone exposes a wound you didn't give them permission to touch. I swallowed hard, trying to steady the heat rising in my chest. The smell of new metal, toasters lined in neat rows, mixed with the faint citrus cleaner of the aisle. I could feel the cold handle of the shopping cart under my fingers, my grip stiffening around it. I forced myself to breathe once, quietly, because I knew if I didn't, something sharper might come out of my mouth. But then she grinned. That grin that never reached her eyes. That grin that said she enjoyed slicing me open just a little. "It's just for the record," she added, almost playful. Something in me shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a click. Like a lock turning in the dark. Because I'd spent years softening myself for people like her. Laughing things off. Avoiding conflict. Letting myself look small so others could feel big. I'd learned to do that long before this day. In my 40s, my 50s, through grief and responsibility, and all the quiet ways life teaches you to fold yourself down just to keep the room calm. But there was something about losing both of my parents and then having someone throw that grief into the fluorescent light of an appliance aisle that made me still. Heavy, anchored. I could feel that old, familiar ache in my chest, the one that comes from loving people too generously and being blindsided anyway. A small inhale, a single decision. "Well," I said softly, turning to her, meeting her eyes, "for the record, your parents bought yours." Her whole body went rigid. The employee mumbled some excuse and escaped. I barely noticed. All I saw was her face tightening, the way her pupils sharpened like she couldn't believe I had spoken back. She stepped away, leaving the smell of her perfume in her wake, storming toward the automatic doors. My legs moved before my thoughts did, following her out into the parking lot. The air hit me. Cool, dry, oddly grounding. A car alarm chirped somewhere in the distance. The asphalt radiated a soft warmth from the afternoon sun. She paced near the bumper of her car, hugging her jacket tight as if I had stripped the comfort right off her. "You're unbelievable," she snapped when I approached. "You had no right to embarrass me like that." Embarrass her. The word pressed against my ribs like a thumb on a bruise. "I didn't embarrass you," I said, keeping my voice calm, even though a quiet tremor was running through my hands. "I repeated what you put into the room first. That is not the same thing." She folded her arms. "You said it like I couldn't afford anything myself." "You implied the same about me," I said, "except you did it in front of a stranger when I wasn't even talking about my personal life." She flushed, but instead of softening, she doubled down. Her voice rose, sharp, brittle. "It's different. I earned what I have." Something inside me went cold, a flat stillness spreading under my ribs. "I lost both of my parents," I said quietly. "That's how I got my house. If you think that's some kind of shortcut, then you haven't listened to a single thing I've lived through." The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It had weight. Heavy, thick, buzzing with every unspoken thing between us. People passed behind us pushing carts, wheels rattling. A child cried somewhere near the entrance. A gust of wind lifted the corner of a receipt that had been stuck to the pavement. All of it blurred behind the pressure of that moment. She stared at me like she didn't recognize who was standing in front of her. Maybe she didn't. Maybe I didn't either. Because I'd spent years shrinking. Years being the friend who absorbed the sharp edges. Who laughed awkwardly when people crossed lines, who focused on keeping peace instead of keeping dignity. But grieving makes you reevaluate the ground you stand on. It strips comfort from your life until only truth remains, bare and unembellished. And the truth was simple. She didn't cut me, because she was honest. She cut me because she liked the sound it made. "You didn't have to say anything," she muttered eventually, looking away, her voice suddenly small. "You could have just let it go." "I've let a lot of things go," I said. "But that one wasn't mine to carry." A long beat passed between us. No apology, no understanding, just the stale tension of two people who suddenly realized the friendship had been uneven for a very long time. The sunlight hit her windshield, a sharp glare that made me blink. A quiet chill ran through me, a realization settling in my bones that this moment wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning of truth resurfacing, and I could feel it. The faintest pull of something shifting beneath the surface, a warning, a question, an unraveling that wasn't done yet. Because the look she gave me next wasn't hurt. It was something else entirely. Something that told me this wasn't over, not by a long shot. The moment she drove away, the parking lot felt strangely hollow, as if her absence left a pressure in the air rather than relief. I stood there for a long second, feeling the asphalt radiating warmth through the soles of my shoes. A grocery cart rattled somewhere behind me. A child complained to his mother, and the breeze lifted a strand of hair across my cheek. Life moved, casually and unbothered, while something in me had shifted in a way I couldn't yet name. Inside the store, the lights felt harsher when I walked back in. The hum of fluorescent bulbs pressed on my ears. The employee who'd helped us earlier caught sight of me and quickly looked away, pretending to straighten a display of microwaves. I didn't blame him. No one wants to walk back into someone else's friction. Still, the avoidance stung more than it should have. Not because of him, but because it echoed something I'd felt too many times in my life. The quiet distancing people do when conflict makes them uncomfortable, even when you weren't the one who caused it. I pretended to read the labels on a coffee maker, though the words blurred slightly from the heat that still lingered behind my eyes. My breathing felt uneven, shallow in a way I hadn't noticed until I tried to steady myself. I touched the edge of the appliance shelf, grounding myself on the cool metal. A couple walked past me, whispering about air fryers. Their casual cheerfulness drifted by like nothing had happened, but I caught the tail end of a look. The woman glanced at me, then at the doors where my friend had stormed out. A flicker of pity, or judgment. I couldn't tell which. I hated that feeling. The sense of being inspected after an argument, like you were supposed to apologize simply for being visible in the aftermath. My chest tightened, a familiar squeeze, the same one I used to feel when neighbors whispered behind my back the year my mother got sick. People love a spectacle, but they rarely love the truth inside it. A small vibration buzzed in my purse. My phone lit up. A message from her. "I can't believe you said that. You humiliated me." No greeting, no pause, just the accusation, sharp as ever. My thumb hovered over the screen, but I didn't respond. Not yet. Responding too quickly always gave her more ground than she deserved. Over the years, I'd learned that much, at least, even if I hadn't always acted on it. Another message came before I could slip the phone away. "Everyone knows my parents helped me. You didn't have to say it." I felt my jaw clench. A small pulse beat at the side of my neck. She was rewriting the moment already, pushing the blame outward, redirecting the weight of her own actions. It wasn't new. She'd always had a way of placing herself in the position of the wounded party, even when she'd been the one who struck first. I slipped the phone back into my purse. The appliance aisle felt too bright now, too exposed. I moved to a quieter section near the vacuum displays, letting the dimmer lighting soften the static in my head. My hands were still a little unsteady, and I rubbed them together as if trying to warm them. My partner texted me then. "Everything okay? Did something happen?" I typed back slowly. She made a comment. I repeated it back. She didn't like that. The 3 dots appeared almost immediately. "Proud of you for standing up for yourself." I exhaled, a slow, shaky breath, that loosened something between my ribs. His support settled over me gently, like a warm shawl I hadn't realized I needed. But even with that comfort, the sting of the encounter lingered, not because of what she'd said, but because of what it revealed. The small cracks in our friendship suddenly didn't look so small. When I reached for a toaster on the display shelf, my hand brushed another woman's as she reached for the same one. She smiled politely, stepping aside. "Go ahead," she said. Her voice was warm, unbothered. It made me realize how tense I'd become, how much of that tension was clinging to me like static. "Thank you," I murmured, my voice softer than I expected. She wandered off, comparing models with a companion, and I found myself staring at the chrome surface of the toaster. My reflection in it was warped, stretched, distorted, but I could still make out the tiredness in my eyes. A small ache moved behind my sternum. I wasn't sad exactly. I wasn't angry either. It was something more subtle, disappointment with a hint of resignation. The quiet grief of recognizing that someone you trusted didn't actually know how to be kind when kindness cost them anything at all. My phone buzzed again. One more message. "If you're going to be petty like that, maybe we need space." The phrasing struck me, a soft threat wrapped in indignation, words meant to shift the power back into her hands. For years, I'd let that tone guide my reactions. I'd folded myself down, made myself smaller, kept the peace. But there are moments in life, especially after loss, where you start to reevaluate what peace actually means, whether it's silence you've chosen or silence someone else has pressed onto you. I slipped the phone deep into my bag this time. I didn't want her words resting against me. When I reached the checkout line, the store felt even colder. Or maybe I was just noticing things more sharply. The cashier greeted me with a gentle smile, scanning my items with practiced motions. She didn't ask about my day. I was grateful for that. As I stepped out into the parking lot again, the sun had shifted slightly, casting longer shadows across the pavement. A small flutter of anxiety stirred in my stomach, uninvited and persistent. Something about the way my friend had walked away earlier, the stiffness in her shoulders, the expression that flickered across her face. It wasn't hurt. It wasn't anger. It was something calculating, something that suggested she wasn't finished drawing lines around what she believed I owed her. I paused beside my car, keys in hand, the breeze brushing against my cheek, carrying the faint smell of cut grass from somewhere nearby. A strange heaviness settled in the center of my chest. Not dread, exactly, but a sense of gathering pressure, as if this moment in the parking lot wasn't the conflict, as if it was only the beginning. I reached for the door handle, but then my phone buzzed yet again. This time with a notification that made my breath catch subtly in my throat. A message not from her, but from one of our mutual friends, and the preview alone told me that whatever I thought this was turning into, it was about to unfold in a very different direction. I didn't grow up thinking a house could become a weapon. To me, a house was always a small, tired thing with peeling paint and thin walls, the kind that let in every neighbor's argument and every winter draft. I grew up in one like that on the edge of town. A squat little place where the linoleum curled up at the corners and the plumbing rattled whenever someone flushed. But inside, it smelled like coffee, laundry detergent, and my mother's favorite cheap jasmine lotion. Inside, it felt like love stretched thin but never completely torn. My parents never called it property. They called it our roof, like it was a living creature we were all responsible for keeping alive. My father worked double shifts at the factory for that roof. My mother picked up night cleaning jobs so the roof wouldn't leak onto our beds. I remember waking up as a girl to the sound of the washing machine groaning in the hallway, the faint buzz of the TV left on low, and my mother sitting at the table with a stack of envelopes in front of her. There was always that same worn brown envelope in the middle of the pile, the one with the thick black letters from the bank. The paper around it would change month to month, but that envelope never did. It sat there like a quiet threat until she opened it, sighed, and started writing numbers on a notepad with her blue pen. That envelope became my first understanding of responsibility, of fear, of the way paper could dictate how much sleep a person got. By the time I turned 18, the house and I were the same age. My father used to pat the doorframe when he came home, as if greeting an old friend. "We'll keep you standing," he'd mumble, boots leaving dust on the mat. My mother would tap the brown envelope with 2 fingers and say, "One more month, okay? Just one more month." It was half joke, half prayer. I didn't go away to college like some of my classmates. I took the first full-time job I could find at a small office supply store just off the highway. The pay was nothing special, but it came with a predictable schedule and, more importantly, health insurance for my parents once I could add them on. I still remember the feel of those first pay stubs in my hand, thin slips of paper that smelled faintly of ink and machine oil, proof that I could finally contribute more than leftover change. Every Friday evening, I'd come home, drop my bag on the couch, and lay my check on the table. My mother would slide it closer, her fingers brushing mine, then pull open the same drawer where she kept the brown envelope. Inside, she'd tuck the check into a spiral notebook with a cracked plastic cover. In that notebook, she wrote down every payment any of us ever made toward the house. Dates. Amounts. My initials, my father's. Tiny notes in the margin like extra hours or overtime bonus. That notebook was our history, scribbled in ink and anxiety. Years later, when I open that drawer, the smell hasn't changed. Paper, dust, a faint trace of the jasmine lotion my mother wore every day until the very end. I didn't start out as the type of woman who kept other people afloat. It just happened in increments. My younger cousin needed a place to stay after a breakup. My parents insisted we make room. A coworker's car broke down, and I gave her rides for weeks. Little favors piled on top of each other until one day you wake up and realize you've built a life around making sure other people don't drown. That's how I became close with her. The friend who stood beside me in the appliance store years later, pretending her honesty was some noble trait. We met in our early 20s at a temp job downtown. She wore heeled boots she couldn't quite walk in and carried a leather bag that looked far too expensive for the pay we were getting. I remember her laughing at the break room coffee, calling it mud, then buying us both lattes from the cafe downstairs. "You're too serious," she told me once when I stayed late to help the manager finish end-of-week inventory. "They're never going to love you back the way you love this place." She wasn't wrong. The manager cried when I left that job. The company didn't even send a card. Over the years, our paths kept crossing. I changed jobs, she changed jobs. I went back to school part-time for a couple of certifications. She jumped from department to department until she landed something fully remote. There was always something a little glittery about her life story. Not quite stable, but shiny. New shoes, weekend trips, photos with cocktails against city skylines. I never envied the glitter. I envied the ease, the way money seemed to bend around her without ever quite burning her fingers. Meanwhile, I was folding myself into early mornings and late nights. I'd work a full shift, then go straight to my parents' place to cook, clean, and help them sort through mail. My father's health started to slip first. Blood pressure, then his knees, then his memory. My mother followed with her own quiet battles. Fatigue she ignored, aches she dismissed. Appointments she delayed because she didn't want to be a burden. One winter, the roof actually did start to leak. The first drip landed in the hallway, right in front of the framed picture of my first grade class. The second one soaked through the ceiling right over the corner of the kitchen table, creating a brown stain that spread across the plaster like an infection. "Don't worry," my father said, even as he winced lifting the ladder. "I'll patch it up." But his hand shook halfway up the rungs, and he had to climb back down, sitting heavily at the table where that brown bank envelope waited. I took on a weekend job then, a few hours at a local diner taking night shifts. The smell of grease and burnt coffee seeped into my hair, even after a shower. I'd come home, peel off my shoes, and sit on the edge of my bed staring at my feet. They looked older than the rest of me, swollen and red, veins popping in thin lines. But every month, my paycheck and tips went into the same spiral notebook. My mother's handwriting grew smaller over time, more cramped, but she never stopped recording. "This house is yours, you know," she told me once, tapping the page with my initials. "One day it'll have your name on it." I didn't want it like that. I wanted them in it. There were years, whole stretches of them, where the days blurred into routines. Work, parents, bills, repeat. Sometimes my friend would call and drag me out for drinks. I'd arrive in my plain work flats, feeling out of place in bars where everyone looked 10 years younger and dressed for pictures, not for weather. "You need to enjoy life," she'd say, raising her glass. "You're always stuck at that house." "It's my parents," I'd answer. "They need me." "No," she'd insist, a playful edge in her voice. "They need to hire help. You need to live." I never told her how we'd priced home care, how the numbers made my stomach turn. I never told her that my parents would have rather eaten canned soup forever than let a stranger bathe them. I didn't tell her that I had tried, once, to bring in a nurse part-time, and my mother had cried silently in the bathroom afterward, humiliated. Some sacrifices are difficult to explain to people who have never had to choose between dignity and convenience. My father passed first. It was a slow unraveling, the kind that doesn't come with a single dramatic moment. He just got quieter, frailer. The house felt louder without his boots on the floor and his news channel murmuring in the background. The day the funeral home van came, I stood out on the front lawn in the cold sunlight and watched as they carried him out on a stretcher. The wind bit at my ears. The roses by the front steps had long since died, leaving only thorny branches like thin, accusing fingers. After that, the brown envelope stopped arriving. The mortgage was almost paid off by then. Years of scraping and overtime had done their work. Instead, new envelopes started showing up, from hospitals, insurance, specialists with long titles on their letterheads. The spiral notebook swallowed those numbers too. When my mother's handwriting finally gave out, she pressed the notebook into my hands. "You keep it now," she said, lying in her bed in the front room, the curtains letting in a soft gray light. Her skin looked thinner than the bedsheet. "You know what everything means." I sat on the edge of the bed and traced the ridges of the plastic cover with my thumb. The pages inside crackled softly when I opened them. Decades of sacrifice, recorded in blue and black ink. "It's just paper," I managed. "It's our life," she corrected. "Don't you ever let anyone tell you different." The last time she went to the hospital, the chair in her room faced a small window that looked out onto the parking lot. I'd sit with her in the evenings watching the sun sink behind the building, turning the sky a bruised purple. The artificial light above her bed buzzed softly, that distinct cold glow that makes everything look slightly washed out. On the tray by her bed, there was a yellow discharge sheet from a previous stay, the corner stained with an old coffee ring. For some reason, that paper bothered me more than the machines. It felt like a promise that had never been fully kept, a reminder that they kept sending her home only to call her back again. When she died, it wasn't dramatic either, just a quiet slipping between one breath and the next. The room didn't sound any different. The monitors did what they always did. But the silence inside me rearranged itself into something permanent. The house felt wrong afterward, too big and too small at the same time. I wandered from room to room the first week, touching things. The worn armrest of my father's chair, the chipped mug my mother always used for tea, the drawer with the brown envelope, now replaced with a last letter from the bank congratulating the estate on paying off the loan. The deed came in the mail a few weeks later, my name printed neatly where theirs used to be. I sat at the table under the yellow kitchen light, the spiral notebook and the thick legal document spread out in front of me. The house smelled like dust and lemon cleaner. Outside, a street lamp cast a soft orange halo onto the front yard. I ran my thumb along the raised seal on the deed, and then along the indentation of my mother's handwriting in the notebook. One represented ownership in the eyes of the world. The other represented everything we'd bled to get there. And that's the part people never see when they hear the word inheritance. They see the end result, not the midnight shifts, the skipped vacations, the way grief settles into the drywall. When my friend bought her townhouse, or rather when her parents bought it and handed her the keys, I showed up with a casserole, a toolbox, and my bad knees. I helped her scrub cabinets, carry boxes, assemble flat-pack furniture until my back protested. I meant every "I'm happy for you" that I said. I truly did. But every time she pointed out a feature, the granite countertops, the new flooring, the view from the upstairs window, a small part of me would picture my mother at our kitchen table with that brown envelope and that spiral notebook, flipping pages with tired fingers. I never told my friend about the notebook, or the hospital discharge sheet I kept folded in my bedside drawer, the coffee stain still faintly visible, or the way my father used to pat the doorframe and whisper, "We'll keep you standing," as if the house could hear him. Those were my anchors, my proof, my ghosts. So when she laughed in that store, calling out my inheritance like it was some embarrassing shortcut, she wasn't just correcting a detail in front of a stranger. She was standing, unknowingly, on top of all those sleepless nights and folded paychecks, balancing her pride on the backs of my parents' spines. She just didn't realize yet how much weight that truth still carried. And she definitely didn't realize that there were some things I'd kept from her. Quiet details about that house and that notebook and those papers that, once brought into the light, would change the way she looked at both of us forever. You really shouldn't be living out there alone. It's sad. That was the first thing she said to me the next time we met. Not hello, not how are you, not even a hint of softness. Just that sentence dropped like a stone between us as she stepped into my kitchen, her eyes trailing slowly across the counters as if she were evaluating the life I'd been left with. The morning light through the window was cold, washed out, almost metallic. It sharpened everything. The worn tile, the stack of unopened mail, the faint steam rising from the kettle. I felt myself straighten without meaning to, a small instinct I hadn't noticed in years. We'd barely spoken since the day in the store, but she'd invited herself over to talk, and I'd agreed because conflict always tasted worse when left to rot. She set her sunglasses on the table, letting the arms click loudly against the wood. "I mean, you're in the middle of nowhere." Her smile was thin. "It can't be good for your mental health." I folded my arms loosely, keeping my tone even. "It's peaceful." She drifted a hand across the counter, then inspected her fingertip as if she expected dust. "Sure, let's call it peaceful." There it was again, the subtle dismissal, wrapped in a half smile, polished like something she'd practiced. A small heat pulsed beneath my ribs, quiet but present. I took a slow breath and gestured toward the table. "Sit. We can talk." She didn't. She stayed standing, circling the room like someone examining a rental property for damage. Her heels clicked sharply on the floor, too loud for a house built for people who used to tiptoe so they wouldn't wake each other. "You know," she said, pausing by the window, "when the guys at the shop looked at me after what you said, I wanted to disappear." Her voice took on a theatrical tremble that didn't match her posture. It was humiliating. I watched her reflection in the glass. Her arms were crossed, her chin slightly lifted, eyes scanning the yard as if expecting proof of my failure to sprout from the ground. "You corrected me first," I reminded her softly. She shrugged, still watching the outside world. "Well, I didn't mean it in a mean way. I just don't like when people—" Her eyes darted toward mine in the reflection, sharp and brief. "Embellish things." My hands tensed around the back of the chair. "I didn't embellish anything. You said you bought a house." She turned toward me fully now. You didn't. A hollow quiet pressed in between us, the kind that made you feel smaller, like the walls were leaning in. I didn't want to explain to a stranger that my parents were gone, I said. It wasn't the time. She tilted her head. It's not that hard to say you inherited something. People do it all the time. My breath caught for a second, an involuntary pause, a silence that tasted like embarrassment and anger mixed together. A silence she seemed to enjoy. She leaned back against the counter. Honestly, I think you overreacted in the store. You made it sound like I didn't deserve my place. You said your parents bought yours, I reminded gently. That's different. How? Because, she said, as if it were obvious, I didn't get mine because someone died. The words sliced through the room before I could breathe. For a moment, the world around me dulled. The hum of the refrigerator softened. The clock on the wall ticked slower. The edges of the room blurred. My vision narrowed to her face, expectant, unapologetic, unaware of the cruelty she'd just planted like a flag. My hands trembled once, just once, so subtly I hoped she didn't see. But she did. Oh, come on, she said, pushing off the counter. You can't get offended by everything. She moved toward the living room, running her fingers along the back of the couch as she passed. Her nails tapped the fabric, a metronome of tension. The uneven rhythm of her movements unsettled me. She wandered, circled, paused, stared at objects as though appraising them. Each motion carried a casual disrespect, like she believed my space was an extension of her commentary. You should really think about remodeling, she said suddenly, pointing at the old bookshelf near the doorway. This vintage thing isn't doing you any favors. That was my mother's, I said. She lifted a shoulder. Exactly. A pressure gathered at the base of my throat. I felt myself drifting backward into memories, my mother dusting that bookshelf every Sunday morning, humming under her breath, placing her jasmine lotion on the top shelf to warm in the sun. That bookshelf had survived 30 years, 2 moves, a small house fire, and both of my parents. And here she was, dismissing it as if it were clutter. I'm not getting rid of it, I said. She exhaled dramatically. You're so sentimental. It's not healthy. Her tone sharpened before I could answer. You cling to things, people, places. It's why you never moved on in your life. The words landed heavier than the others. My breath stuttered. I felt my heart tighten like it was trying to shield itself. She walked into the hallway, heels echoing, ignoring the weight in the silence she left behind. I followed slowly, my steps soft but steady. When I reached the doorway, she was staring into the room where my parents used to sleep. Is this where it happened? She asked. My skin went cold. Where what happened? I asked quietly. Where they died. Her voice held no gentleness, no sense of boundary. She stepped inside, her eyes sweeping the room as if gathering evidence for a judgment she'd already made. They didn't die in the house, I said. They passed in the hospital. She clicked her tongue. Then why keep the room like this? It's creepy. It's not creepy, I said. It's pathetic, she interrupted. My breath caught again, a sharp, painful freeze. My stomach tightened so suddenly it felt like the ground had tilted beneath me. She turned back toward me, waving her hand. I'm just being honest. You act like grief is some personality trait. Something flickered behind my eyes, a collapsing moment, sharp and immediate. For an instant, I felt myself fold inward, a reflex older than this friendship, older than the house, older than the spiral notebook still tucked in the drawer downstairs. I wanted to defend myself, explain the truth, say something that would make her understand the weight of what she'd pierced, but no words came, only silence, thick, pressed against my chest, refusing to break. She stepped past me into the hallway again. God, you're sensitive today. Her phone buzzed and she glanced down at the screen. I told the group you lashed out at me. They're kind of shocked, honestly. The ground shifted slightly beneath my feet. You told them what? Oh, relax, she said. I didn't say everything, just that you've been difficult lately, moody, snapping at people. My jaw tightened. That's not what happened. She smirked. People believe what they want to believe. You should know that by now. There it was, the quiet weapon she'd been sharpening. Social cruelty delivered with a smile, emotional cruelty wrapped in implication, silent cruelty simmering in the space she didn't fill with words. I stepped forward, trying to steady my voice. Why would you tell them that? Because, she said lightly, I don't want them thinking I'm the toxic one. My breath hitched. A small, involuntary sound she seemed to register immediately. Her eyes softened for half a second, as though she might reconsider. But then she blinked, and the softness evaporated. You know, she added, this house might be the worst thing that ever happened to you. I froze. The way you talk about it, she said, walking back toward the kitchen, it's like you're chained to it. Like your whole identity is being the sad daughter who took care of everyone and ended up alone. Heat washed up my spine. Humiliation blooming hot and dizzy. I steadied myself on the doorframe, fingers gripping the wood until it creaked faintly. I took a breath, but it didn't feel deep enough. Another, still shallow. She kept going. I mean, look at you, she said, gesturing vaguely at the room, wrapped up in objects and memories instead of living your life. You should be thankful you even have something to inherit. Most people don't get that luxury. Luxury. Losing my parents was a luxury. I felt something inside me tremble, not fear, not anger. A deeper, quieter fracture, the kind that doesn't echo, just cracks slowly as it spreads. She walked to the table again, tapping her nails against it. Honestly, you should sell the place. Use the money to start over. You could finally be interesting. Interesting. As if grief had made me dull, as if caring had made me lesser, as if surviving had made me small. I swallowed the dryness in my throat. You don't get to talk about my parents like that. She blinked, tilting her head. See? There you go again. Too emotional, too attached. You make people uncomfortable. Her eyes met mine, and something shifted in the air. Subtle, almost imperceptible, but real. You embarrassed me, she said quietly. So now we're even. Even. Her cruelty landed in layers. The visible jab, the implied accusation, the silence afterward where she watched me absorb it. I stared at her, my mouth dry, my pulse heavy in my wrists. Her gaze held mine with a calmness that chilled me. And then she gave the smallest smile, as if she hadn't just broken something fragile inside this house, inside me. A car horn echoed faintly outside, snapping the moment in two. The breeze rattled the window slightly, carrying the scent of cut grass into the room. My chest tightened again, not from sadness this time, but from something sharper, something unignorable, something waking. But she didn't notice. She was already reaching for her sunglasses on the table, slipping them on with a practiced elegance. I should go, she said. I've got better things to do today. She started walking toward the door, and as I watched her hand reach for the knob, a cold realization settled into me like a stone sinking through water. This wasn't the worst she was capable of, not yet. The snap didn't happen in some dramatic confrontation. It happened on a Tuesday evening, in soft lighting, with my knees aching and my phone in my hand. I had just finished washing the dishes. The kitchen window was dark enough to reflect my own face back at me, faint and slightly distorted. The hum of the refrigerator filled the quiet. Somewhere down the road, a dog barked once and then stopped. It was one of those evenings where time feels thick, where every movement feels heavier than it should. A small stack of mail sat on the table, flyers, a bill, and one neatly folded letter from the bank confirming the updated property tax assessment. I hadn't opened it yet. The spiral notebook lay beside it, its plastic cover dulled from years of handling. I had pulled it out earlier to note a recent repair expense, then left it there when the sink demanded my attention. My phone buzzed twice on the counter. I dried my hands and reached for it, not expecting much. Most of the people who called me these days did so during the day. Doctors' offices, work contacts, automated reminders. Evening messages usually came from her or from the group chat we'd shared for years. It wasn't a call. It was a notification from one of our mutual friends, Jenna. I hesitated before opening it. A small tightness formed in my chest, that familiar anticipatory discomfort I'd learned to ignore. I tapped the screen. There was no greeting, just a screenshot. At first, my brain didn't process what I was seeing. It was the group chat, the one we'd all used to coordinate dinners, birthdays, movie nights. The top of the thread showed the group name, the list of participants, my name among them. But the small gray bar at the top of the screenshot said, "You left the group." The date stamp next to it was from 3 days ago, except I hadn't left. My eyes dropped to the messages below. Her name, my friend, was the one with the most text bubbles. The first one in the screenshot sat like a stone in the center of the screen. I just don't know how to deal with her anymore. Ever since she inherited that house, she's been impossible. So dramatic, always playing the victim. My fingers tightened around the phone. Below that, another bubble. She snapped at me in public and made me look like a freeloader in front of some random store clerk. Who does that? It's like she resents me for not having dead parents. My heart stuttered, then hammered hard. The words shifted on the screen for a second, my vision blurring. I blinked until they came back into focus, not having dead parents. Someone else in the chat had responded with the little shocked face emoji. Another had typed, "Wow, that's harsh," but I couldn't tell whether they meant what she'd said or what they thought I'd done. She replied again. She made me feel so small. I was shaking after. I don't feel safe around her when she's like this. Safe. I swallowed, the words scraping down my throat. Outside, a car passed slowly, headlights sweeping across the front yard for a brief moment before disappearing. The house settled around me, wood creaking softly. Jenna's message appeared below the screenshot. "I thought you should see this," she'd written. "I didn't realize they'd removed you from the chat until I went looking for your name today. I'm sorry." Removed. My thumb hovered over the screen. I scrolled up slightly. Above the gray bar at the top of the screenshot, there it was, in small text. "Friend removed. Your name from the group." No discussion. No warning. No message asking if I was okay. Just a quiet deletion, followed by a story about how unsafe she felt around me. I felt something in my chest shift. Not break, not shatter. Just move. For a moment, there was the old impulse. Rationalize, excuse, soften. Tell myself she was just venting. That grief had made me difficult. That maybe I had been too sharp in the store. I could feel that familiar instinct rising, reaching for self-blame like it was a coat I knew too well. But then another thought slid in beside it, calm and clear. She hadn't just told one story. She'd rewritten all of them. Every message in that screenshot curved the narrative in her direction, painting herself as misunderstood, painting me as unstable, painting my grief as a weapon. And she'd done it not privately, not to me, but to the people who had stood beside us in photos, who had sat around my parents' table, who had eaten my food and accepted my hospitality, without ever giving me the courtesy of a conversation. My hand loosened just slightly around the phone. Heat flooded my face, then receded, leaving behind a surprising coolness, the kind that feels like a window being opened in a stuffy room. I sat down at the table, the chair legs scraping softly against the floor. The spiral notebook lay where I'd left it, the plastic cover dull under the kitchen light. I placed the phone beside it, side by side. Two records of two very different truths. The notebook, Decades of sacrifice documented line by line. The screenshot, a handful of typed sentences erasing all of it in the eyes of people who didn't know better. I felt the outrage, yes, the hurt, the humiliation. But underneath all of that, something else was forming, clarity. I picked up my phone and reread the messages. Every line, every insinuation, every small, carefully chosen word designed to make me look unstable, selfish, dangerous even. Ever since she inherited that house, as if the house were a curse I'd invited, as if loss were a luxury, as if survival were something shameful. My knee ached under the table. I shifted, pressing my palm gently against it until the pain stabilized. That old familiar throb anchored me, a reminder of every hour I'd spent on my feet, working, cleaning, cooking, caring. My body carried the receipts my friend pretended didn't exist. I opened a new message to Jenna. "Thank you for sending this," I typed slowly. "Did anyone say anything else?" Her typing indicator appeared quickly. "A couple of us felt uncomfortable," she replied. "I said I hadn't seen you act like that." She just doubled down. "Then someone made a joke about you living in the haunted grief house." I left the chat after that. "I thought you'd done the same, but now I'm not so sure." Haunted grief house. I stared at the phrase until the letters blurred again. A laugh escaped me. Short, humorless, almost a cough. It sounded strange in the empty kitchen. I looked around at the walls, at the cabinets my father had refinished, at the window my mother used to stand by while she dried dishes. Nothing about this place felt haunted. It felt heavy, yes, tired, layered. But haunted? No. The only thing echoing here tonight was the realization that I had been letting someone else narrate my story for far too long. I set the phone down, opened the spiral notebook. The pages rustled, filled with dates and numbers and small notes in the margins. My mother's handwriting trailed off around the last year of her life, replaced by my own, a shared record of endurance. I slid my fingers down one page where my initials appeared several times in a row, beside larger amounts, extra payments I'd scraped together working double shifts when the roof leaked, when the plumbing needed repair, when my father's medication cost more than the budget allowed. No one in that chat had seen these pages. They'd only seen the final chapter, the part where my name ended up on the deed. My friend had taken that final line and weaponized it. I closed the notebook gently. This was the moment where, in the past, I would have cried, then convinced myself to salvage the friendship. Drafted a long message explaining how hurt I was, apologized for my tone in the store, tried to meet her in the middle even though she'd dragged the line far past the boundary. But I felt no urge to apologize. What I felt instead was still, anchored. My parents had not sacrificed for decades so that I could spend the rest of my life shrinking whenever someone decided my grief was inconvenient to their pride. I picked up my phone again, opened our individual thread, the one with her name at the top. Her last message still sat there, accusing me of being petty, of being the problem. I started to type, then stopped. Deleted the words. Typed again. Stopped. This wasn't the place to pour my heart out, not to someone who had already shown she would twist it into something unrecognizable. This wasn't a conflict to fix, it was a pattern to end. I typed one sentence. "You removed me from the group and lied about what happened. I saw the messages. We're done." I read it 3 times. It felt almost too short for the magnitude of everything sitting behind it. But brevity, I realized, was its own kind of boundary. I hit send. Then, without waiting for her reply, I opened the settings for our conversation. My thumb hovered over the option for a second, a small, decisive moment where the past and the future balanced on the edge of the same choice. Then I pressed it, and as her name disappeared from my screen, replaced by a blank space where our thread used to be, my phone vibrated in my hand. A new notification sliding down from the top. This time, it wasn't from her. It was from an unfamiliar number with a preview of words that made my blood run cold. Because whoever it was, they weren't just talking about what she said, they were talking about what she had done. The text preview on my screen was short, but it cut straight through my calm. "Hi, you don't know me, but we need to talk about what she's been saying about you." No name, just an unfamiliar number, and those words. I stared at it for a long second. The kitchen clock ticking loud enough to feel like it was inside my skull. My thumb hovered over the notification before I finally opened it. More messages appeared. "I got your number from Jenna. I hope that's okay. I'm one of the people in that group chat." My pulse picked up, steady and heavy. I didn't say anything before, and I regret that. But things have gone too far. She's not just venting about you. She's telling people you're unstable, that you're not safe to be around, that you're deteriorating mentally since the inheritance. Her words, not mine. Something inside me went very still. I read that line 3 times. Not safe to be around. The room didn't spin. It didn't blur. It just felt tighter, as if the air had shrunk. I pulled out a chair and sat down slowly at the table, the wood cool beneath my palms. The spiral notebook lay between my elbows, shut tight, as if it were holding its breath with me. Another message came. "She's talking to people outside the group, too. Mutual acquaintances, a few people from your old job, even someone at that community center she goes to. She keeps saying she's worried about you in this very performative way." Performative worried. I could see it instantly. The tilted head, the sigh, the lowered voice. "I'm just concerned. She's not herself. I'm afraid she might do something." Wrapped in concern, tipped in poison. I typed back. "Who is this?" A moment later. "My name is Elise. We met once at her birthday, a couple years ago. I was the one who spilled wine on the tablecloth and you helped clean it up." I remembered her. Soft-spoken, nervous laugh, kind eyes. I could almost hear her apologizing again in my mind, the way she had that night, while I'd waved it off and fetched paper towels. "I'm sorry I didn't reach out sooner," she wrote. "I kept telling myself it wasn't my business, but then a friend of a friend mentioned you in a way that made me realize how far this has spread. She's been painting you as unwell, dangerous even, to your own house, to other people, to my own house." My fingers tightened around the phone. "What exactly has she said?" I wrote. There was a longer pause this time. The dots appeared, disappeared, then returned. "She told people you've been isolating in that old house, hoarding things from your parents, refusing help, that you lashed out at her for no reason, and that she's afraid you might snap one day." Snap. "You're on her watch list, apparently," Elise added. She said that phrase like she was doing you a favor. I sat back, letting the phone rest on the table for a moment. My heart beat heavily, the rhythm reaching up into my throat. A watch list. It wasn't just cruelty now, it was strategy. I picked up the phone again. "Why tell me now?" I typed. 3 dots. Then, because she asked if she could give your address to someone. She said it was for your own good. A wellness check. She made it sound like you were a danger to yourself. That's when I realized this wasn't just gossip anymore. A chill crawled, slowly up my spine. I could almost hear my mother's voice in the back of my mind, that low warning tone she used to use when a salesman got too pushy at the door. "Careful. This isn't kindness." "Did she give it?" I asked. "I don't know," Elise replied. "She asked in another chat I'm in with her. I didn't respond, but someone else might have." I glanced instinctively at the front door. It was locked, the deadbolt turned, the chain in place. The house was quiet, wrapped in its usual evening stillness, but now that stillness felt like something else, like a fragile boundary someone was tapping against from the outside. "Can you send me screenshots?" I asked, almost immediately. "Yes." A series of images began to stack in the thread. My fingers shook as I opened the first one, her name at the top. Same familiar profile picture, different group this time. The message: "Has anyone checked in on her lately? I'm honestly scared. She's been talking to herself in that empty house and snapping at people for no reason. I'm thinking of calling someone to do a wellness check before she hurts herself or someone else." The responses varied. "Wow, really?" I knew something was off last time I saw her. "You should call someone. You never know." She replied again. "I just don't want to be blamed if something happens. She's not the same since her parents died. The inheritance messed with her head. She acts like she's the only one who's ever had problems." Another screenshot, another chat. "She almost attacked me in a store the other day, over nothing. I was shaking for hours. I don't feel comfortable being alone with her anymore." Attacked. I could still hear my own voice from that day, level, controlled, quiet. I'd repeated back what she'd said about me, nothing more. My body hadn't even moved toward her. If anything, I'd stepped back. But in her version, I was dangerous. My fingers moved almost automatically, saving the screenshots to my phone, then forwarding copies to my email. I didn't know yet what I'd do with them, but instinctively I knew. Digital things have a way of disappearing when you need them most. "Thank you," I wrote to Elise, "for sending these." "I should have spoken up sooner," she replied. "I'm sorry I stayed quiet while she did this. I believed her at first. She's very convincing when she plays the concerned friend." Concerned friend. The phrase rolled around in my mind, heavy and bitter. I looked at the spiral notebook again, then at the letter from the bank I still hadn't opened. Two worlds side by side, the tangible reality of a life built one payment at a time, and the intangible world of words, where someone else had declared me unhinged. I stood and walked to the drawer beneath the counter, opened it. The faint smell of old paper and dust rose up, carrying a trace of the past with it. I pulled out the hospital discharge sheet from my mother's final stay, the one with the coffee ring, held it between my fingers for a moment, feeling the thinness of the paper, the fragility of it. She had watched me fold this life down, piece by piece, to take care of two dying parents. She'd watched me stagger through their funerals, sort their things, pay their bills. She'd eaten at this table, sat on that couch, and now she was telling people I was talking to walls. I set the paper down. For the first time in a long time, I felt something new. Not just hurt, not just anger, but a quiet resolve that didn't feel like me trying to prove anything to her. It felt like me refusing to disappear under a story that wasn't mine. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found a familiar name. Margaret. Retired social worker, neighbor from 3 doors down, the one who had brought casseroles to the house after my mother died and always left with empty containers and a careful, observing eye. She answered on the second ring. "Hey there," she said. "Everything okay?" Her voice was steady, grounded. Just hearing it slowed my pulse a little. "I need to ask you something," I said. "Have the police been by here? Or anyone? Saying they're checking on me?" She was quiet for a moment. "Not that I've seen. Why?" I hesitated, then exhaled slowly. "Because someone's been telling people I'm unstable, that I might be a danger to myself. They're talking about wellness checks. And I don't think they're going to stop at talking." Margaret's tone shifted instantly. "Who?" she asked, all warmth replaced by professional alertness. "What have they said exactly?" I walked her through it. Not every detail, but enough. The rumors, the chat removal, the messages, the screenshots. By the time I finished, the kitchen felt different. Not lighter exactly, but not as lonely either. "You did the right thing calling me," she said. "If anyone shows up, you have the right to ask questions, to know who called, what was said, and if this becomes a pattern, there are steps you can take." "Steps?" I asked. She lowered her voice slightly. "Defamation, harassment, document everything, Save every message, every screenshot. Write down dates and times. If she's telling people you're dangerous without cause, that can have real consequences. For her. For her. A small flicker of something almost like satisfaction sparked in my chest. Not because I wanted revenge, but because, for once, there might be a way to stop the bleeding without cutting myself open to do it. "I'll start a log," I said. "Good," she replied. "And in the meantime, don't let her scare you into staying quiet. People like that count on your silence." After we hung up, I went to the hallway closet and pulled out an old notebook. Nothing special, just a half-used lined pad from years ago. I brought it back to the table and set it beside my mother's spiral one. 2 records, one of sacrifice, one of what came after. On the first page of the new notebook, I wrote the date. Then I listed everything. Her comment in the store, her visit to my house, the group chat removal, the accusations about my mental state, the messages from Elise, facts, not feelings, time, place, words used. When I finished, I stared at the 2 notebooks for a moment. They looked almost like before and after photos, the life my parents had built, and the life someone else was trying to dismantle with a few well-placed sentences. My phone buzzed again, a new message, this time from a name I recognized from years ago, an old coworker I hadn't spoken to in ages. "Hey," it read, "random question. Are you okay? I heard some things. Wanted to check in myself." My stomach sank. "What things?" I typed. There was a pause. Then, "She told someone we both know that you'd been forgetting to lock your door, leaving the stove on, talking to people who aren't there. She hinted you might be slipping. I didn't believe it, but she seemed so sincere when she said she was worried. Now I'm not sure what to think." The stove. I glanced automatically at the kitchen. The burners were off, knobs all turned to 0. I'd checked twice before. I always did. Years of caregiving had made me obsessive about such things. "I haven't done any of that," I wrote back. "She's lying." "I figured," he replied. "That's why I reached out to you directly. But if she's telling that story to others, you might have more people quietly concerned about you than you realize." Quietly concerned. Concern as camouflage. I added his message to the log. The pattern was clear now. She wasn't just trying to win an argument, she was laying a foundation, a narrative where every future accusation against me could be brushed aside with, "Well, you know she hasn't been herself since the inheritance." And if anything did happen, if I forgot an appointment, missed a call, raised my voice once, she'd have a line of people ready to say they'd seen it coming. I closed the log and rested my hand on top of it. This wasn't just about my feelings anymore. It was about my name, my safety, my ability to move through the world without being treated like a problem waiting to happen. I picked up my phone and scrolled to another contact. Anna, mutual friend, one of the quiet ones in the group, someone who rarely took sides, who always tried to smooth things over rather than tear them apart. She answered with a cautious, "Hello?" as if she were expecting bad news. "It's me," I said. There was a pause. "Oh, hi." Her tone told me more than her word did. "You've heard things," I said. She exhaled. "Yes. And you haven't asked me once if they're true." Silence. Then softly, "I didn't know how." That landed harder than I expected. My throat tightened. I swallowed it down. "I have screenshots," I said, "of what she's been saying. I have people reaching out, telling me what she's told them. She's not worried about me, Anna. She's building a case." Another silence, longer this time. "I didn't realize it was that bad," she said. "She just keeps saying she's scared for you, that you're angry all the time, that the house made you obsessive." "The house didn't make me anything," I said. "Losing my parents did. Taking care of them did. Watching them die did. And even through all of that, I have never hurt anyone." I could hear her breathing on the line, fast, uneven. "I'm not asking you to pick sides," I added. But I am asking you to look at what she's saying and ask yourself why she needs me to be broken so badly. A faint rustle, like she was pacing. Can you send me what you have? Yes. I'll look, she said. I can't promise. I'm not asking for promises, I interrupted softly, just eyes open. After we hung up, I forwarded the screenshots to her, then to my email again, then saved them in a separate folder with a name I'd recognize later, Records. A new notification pinged almost immediately from Anna. Wow, it read. I didn't know. This is calculated. Calculated. The word settled over everything like a layer of frost. I wrote it in the log. The night deepened outside. The kitchen light cast a small pool of yellow over the table. The rest of the house sat in soft shadow, familiar and watchful. I pressed my palms flat against the wood, feeling the grain beneath my skin. For the first time since my parents died, I didn't feel like I was the one in danger of falling apart. She was the one building something unstable. And I was the one with evidence. The question now wasn't whether she meant harm, it was how far she was willing to go, and how much of it I was prepared to drag into the light in front of everyone who'd believed her. I didn't choose the place for the confrontation. She did. Or rather, she chose the audience and the place came attached. It was a Sunday afternoon, the kind where the air feels heavy before a storm even forms. My phone buzzed with a message from Anna. They're all meeting at the cafe on Maple. She's already there. You should come. Not accusatory, not demanding, just steady. As if she'd made her decision already. I stared at the message for a long moment. The house around me was completely silent. My parents' old clock ticked in the hallway. Outside, clouds thickened over the trees, darkening the windows in a slow, creeping gradient. I knew what this was. She'd summoned an audience. She wanted a stage. She wanted me cornered, small, defensive, exactly the version she'd been selling behind my back. But something inside me had shifted long before this moment. The stillness from the night I opened the screenshots had rooted itself like an iron spine. I picked up my log notebook. The pages were thick with dates, phrases, copied messages, screenshots printed and taped carefully. Proof, not feelings. Proof. I slid it into my bag beside the spiral notebook, my mother's handwriting pressed against the spine like a whisper of encouragement. When I stepped outside, the air tasted like metal. The wind had started to stir, rattling the branches overhead. I locked the door behind me and felt a small, unexpected calm settle across my shoulders. I wasn't walking into a trap. I was walking into a reckoning. The cafe was already crowded when I arrived, its windows fogged from the body heat inside. A cluster of familiar faces sat at a long table near the back. Anna, Jenna, a few others who had been quiet throughout all this. And there she was, perfect posture, fresh manicure, a soft, concerned expression painted flawlessly across her face. The moment her eyes met mine, I saw it, the flicker of triumph. She believed she'd already won. She stood up slowly, her performance beginning before I even opened my mouth. "Oh," she said, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "You came." There it was, the framing, the tone, the implication that my presence was unexpected, unstable, a risk she was bravely managing. I removed my coat calmly. I was invited. Anna stood to make room for me beside her, and I saw the subtle relief in her eyes, a tiny nod, just enough to say, "I'm here, and I'm ready." My friend placed a delicate hand over her chest, as if steadying herself. "I didn't think you'd want to be around everyone, considering how things have been." I sat down slowly, keeping my movements controlled. Quiet strength draws more attention than chaos ever could. "You mean," I said, "considering what you've been telling them?" A hush fell across the table. The clinking of cups from other customers faded into a soft, distant buzz. She blinked, caught off guard by the steadiness in my voice. "Excuse me?" she said, smiling thinly. "I haven't said anything that wasn't out of concern." Jenna shifted. Anna exhaled. Someone down the table leaned forward slightly, sensing the tension. I opened my bag and removed the notebook, not the log, but the spiral-bound one. My mother's. I placed it on the table and kept my hand resting lightly on the cover. Her eyes flicked to it, confused. "You know what this is," I said quietly. She hesitated. "It's something of your mother's, right?" "It's the record of every payment made on the house you've been calling a mental burden. Every sacrifice my parents and I made, every number written in their handwriting." A crack formed in her expression, small, but visible. "You've been telling people," I continued, my voice low and even, "that this house made me unstable, that I'm a danger to myself, that I'm talking to walls, that I'm forgetting to lock the door." She opened her mouth, but I didn't let her interrupt. "You told people you were afraid of me. You told them I snapped at you violently in a store. You said I might hurt someone. You tried to justify removing me from the group chat by painting me as dangerous." Someone at the table inhaled sharply. Someone else muttered, "Oh my God." Her smile faltered. "I never said—" I opened my bag again and removed the log notebook this time. I placed it beside the spiral one. The sound of it hitting the table was soft, but it carried weight. Actual weight. "You said all of it," I said. "And I have screenshots from multiple people you told." Her face drained of color. "Those are out of context." I turned a page, sliding it toward the center. The printout showed her text bubble clearly. "She's deteriorating mentally since the inheritance. I'm scared she might snap." Anna leaned closer to read it. Her eyes widened. I turned another page. "She attacked me out of nowhere in a store. I don't feel safe." More reactions, more murmurs, more shifting in seats. My friend reached for the paper, panic flickering across her features. Don't show that around like it proves anything." "It does prove something," I said, my voice soft as a knife sliding through cloth. "It proves a pattern." Her breath quickened. Her hand trembled slightly before she hid it under the table. "I said those things because I was worried about you," she insisted, louder this time, hoping the volume would rewrite the truth. "No," I said, "you said those things because you were worried about yourself." A silence so thick it felt like the whole cafe leaned in to hear. "You were embarrassed in the appliance store, and you decided to punish me for it. You were angry that I spoke one truth about you, so you tried to destroy my reputation in the safest way possible by pretending it came from concern." She shook her head furiously. "You're twisting everything. You've been so emotional, so unpredictable. I was trying to protect you." "By calling me unstable?" Her lips parted. No sound came out. "By telling people I'm dangerous?" A faint tremble moved through her jaw. "By trying to get my address to someone for a wellness check?" Her eyes snapped up to mine, fear blooming fast. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Elise told me," I said, "and she showed me the chat where you said it." The name hit her like a cold splash. She stiffened, shoulders rising slightly, breath caught. From across the table, someone whispered, "She did what?" Her gaze darted around, searching for an ally. The faces around her had changed, tightened, hardened, recoiled. Her charm wasn't landing anymore. I leaned forward gently, not threatening, not emotional, simply precise. "You tried to build a story where anything I said or did could be dismissed as grief or instability, so that if I ever called you out, you'd already have an audience primed to see me as irrational." Her mouth quivered. The cafe noise filled the silence again, soft and distant, as if sound moved around the truth but refused to touch it. And then, almost like she couldn't stop herself, she whispered, "You embarrassed me." There it was, the core, the rot. No mercy, no concern, no worry, just ego. I sat back slowly. "This wasn't about concern," I said. "It was about revenge." The room felt frozen. Someone cleared their throat. Another pushed back slightly from the table. Eyes met eyes in stunned recognition. Anna was the first to speak. "You lied to us," she said, voice trembling, not with fear, but with disappointment so deep it almost folded the air. Jenna nodded. "You made her look unhinged, and we believed you." My friend dropped her gaze, her mask slipping entirely now. Her fingers twisted together in her lap, restless, exposed. "I didn't think she'd find out," she whispered. There was a collective inhale around the table, the kind people take when they're witnessing the precise moment a lie collapses on its maker. I spoke one last time, steady and clear. "This ends now. Every rumor, every lie, every performance. You don't get to rewrite my grief or my sanity to protect your pride." Her eyes lifted slowly, wet, wide, terrified. "I never meant for it to go this far," she said, her voice cracking. But she had, because cruelty rarely stops where it starts. A distant rumble of thunder rolled across the sky outside, low and resonant. The cafe lights flickered briefly, enough to draw glances, but not enough to break the tension. I gathered my notebooks, my mother's and my own, and stood up. "I'm not going to ruin your life," I said quietly. "But I won't let you ruin mine." She reached out as if to grab my wrist, but someone behind her murmured, "Don't." Her hand fell back to her lap. I turned to leave, the storm clouds outside deepening, streetlight reflections rippling across the wet pavement. And just as I reached the door, I heard one last sentence behind me, soft, trembling, not meant for me, but escaping anyway. "What do I do now?" No one answered her, because the room finally understood. This wasn't my downfall. It was hers. The storm had already passed by the time I drove home, leaving the road streaked with thin ribbons of rain. The trees on either side of the highway dripped steadily, their leaves heavy and darkened. The clouds were beginning to lift, but the world still held that washed, quiet look that only comes after something has broken open and settled again. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked different. Not newer, not lighter, just unburdened. The porch light glowed softly against the fading sky. The same bulb my father had changed every fall, the same fixture my mother used to wipe clean with a damp cloth before holidays. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, letting the familiar scent rise to meet me. Coffee, old paper, a hint of jasmine still clinging to the bookshelf like a memory that refused to dissipate. For the first time in months, it didn't hurt. I set my bag down on the table and loosened my shoulders, feeling the weight of the day slide off me piece by piece. My coat dripped faintly onto the floor, forming a small, dark puddle, but I didn't rush to clean it. The house felt patient tonight, as if it knew I needed a moment of stillness before I moved. I walked into the living room and touched the top of the bookshelf with my fingertips, tracing the grooves my mother's dust cloth used to smooth. The wood felt warm, almost alive under my hand. Outside, the cicadas were beginning their evening chorus, low and rhythmic. This room had held so many versions of me. The daughter sorting bills, the caretaker warming soup, the grieving woman standing in an empty space trying to remember how to breathe. And now, another version, the woman who finally said enough. I sank into my father's old chair, letting its familiar frame hold the shape of me the way it always had. The distant rumble of thunder had completely faded. Only the faint hum of the refrigerator filled the quiet. On the table beside me sat both notebooks. My mother's on the left, mine on the right. 2 histories, 2 truths. I opened hers first. The spiral creaked softly. The ink on some pages had faded, the lines thinning from time and years. Payments, overdue notices, tiny notes about extra hours, asterisks marking moments when things had been harder than usual. My mother's handwriting curved gently across the pages, the loops intentional, steady, almost graceful despite the exhaustion that must have followed every stroke of the pen. I closed that notebook and opened mine. Screenshots, dates, Sentences spoken behind my back, the picture of a person who didn't want me to collapse, but wanted me to appear as if I already had. One notebook documented sacrifice, the other documented survival, and both told the truth of who I was more honestly than any rumor ever could. I leaned back and let my eyes close for a moment. A kind of warmth spread through my chest, not triumph, not bitterness, something quieter, something like reclaiming a name after someone else tried to scratch it out. I could still hear her voice in the cafe. "You embarrassed me." But the thing about truth is that it doesn't need volume, or performance, or an audience ready to believe the worst. It only needs light. And today, finally, the light had been mine to turn on. The floor creaked softly as I stood and walked to the kitchen. I made tea, the same brand my mother used to buy, the scent rising sweet and familiar as I poured hot water into her old mug. I carried it to the table and sat down with both notebooks in front of me. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need apologies. What I needed, what I finally had, was clarity. And clarity, once found, doesn't leave. Before going to bed, I slipped my mother's notebook back into its drawer, the one beneath the counter where she used to hide chocolate bars for emergencies. I placed mine beside it, separate stories but connected now by a single line: I will not shrink myself again. When I turned off the lights, the house settled around me, not heavy, not haunted, but steady, strong, held up by everything we'd survived together. I locked the door, checked the stove, closed the curtains. Not because I was losing my mind, but because I had finally found it. And in the quiet dark of that house, with the last echo of rain dripping from the gutters, I felt a peace I hadn't recognized in years. Peace that didn't come from forgetting. Peace that came from finally being seen, even if only by myself. The spiral notebook is still here beside me, its pages worn soft from years of being touched. For so long it felt like a weight, a reminder of everything I'd lost. But tonight, as I close it, it feels like something else, a proof of where I came from and the strength I didn't realize I'd carried all this time. If any part of my story stayed with you, tell me. Sometimes, sharing what we've carried helps us understand we were never as alone as we thought.